You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 13th of July, 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program.
It's open. We bombed the hell out of them last night. They're very, very evil and sick people.
Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump claims he's reopened it. We'll discuss the realities on the ground in the Gulf. After that, we look at the massive restructuring plan for Germany's Volkswagen and ask whether it's symptomatic of a broader challenge for German competitiveness. We'll head to Norway to see how the country is dealing surprisingly well with its World Cup defeat. And finally...
And so I thought of it and I was like, okay, I think this is one song. I love Phoenix, obviously. So I was like, there's so many reasons to say yes.
The Belgian singer Angèle talks performing at the Paris Olympics and more with our own Fernando Augusto Pacheco. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. And a very happy Monday to all of our listeners around the world. Hope you've had great weekends. But over that weekend, the balance between diplomacy and military action in the ongoing conflict between Iran and the United States has once again tipped toward the latter. The pattern is familiar at this point. Iran attacks commercial ships, declares the Strait of Hormuz closed once again, blaming the illegal passage of U.S. military vessels. The U.S. launches strikes on Iran, and Iran aims for U.S. bases in the Gulf in retaliation. Donald Trump last week declared the ceasefire over, and as we head into a new week, well, it seems like he wasn't kidding. Joining me now is our Gulf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid. Inzi, good to have you back on the show. How did this descend so dramatically over the weekend?
Yeah, look, it was a turbulent weekend, and it's been a turbulent week, in fact, in the whole Iran war saga, Chris, because, as you mentioned at the very top, there was diplomacy happening to an extent. And then all of a sudden, we've seen fighting erupt between the US and Iran. And also, the countries that were involved in diplomacy were subsequently targeted by Iran. So it's left so many question marks over where we go from here. Let me just tell you what's happened overnight first, and then I can recap a bit about the weekend. So once again, there were fresh strikes overnight. The US confirmed that it had launched new strikes against Iran. They said they attacked dozens of targets in the country. It was less than 140 of the targets that they had hit the night before. But interestingly, Washington had actually deployed a new weapon in this war. These are one-way attack sea drones that were used for the first time in these latest strikes. They've been used previously to try and identify some missing soldiers after a helicopter was shot down over the Strait of Hormuz earlier in the conflict. However, this time they've been used to actually carry out attacks. And I think that gives us a signal that the US has potentially ramped up its military aggression, particularly in this latest round of fighting. But Chris, I want to tell you what happened over the weekend, because firstly, on Friday, we saw the Qataris inside Tehran to try and de-escalate the latest round of tit-for-tat fighting between the two countries. That happened, and my sources who were there with the Qatari government had actually said that those conversations were pretty positive. And then on Saturday, we saw the Iranian foreign minister head to Muscat in Oman to essentially ask the Omanis for help to try and sort out the Strait of Hormuz issue. That was a conversation that also apparently went quite well. Iran wants to regulate the waterway. They want to have some form of control over the Strait of Hormuz. That's something that the Gulf states say that they can't have, but Iran says it's baked into the Memorandum of Understanding, into point 5, that they can come up with some form of mechanism with Oman. But then just a few hours after the Iranian delegation left Oman, they then targeted a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. That led to the US strikes on Iran, and then that led to the Iranian retaliation on the Gulf states, including Oman and Qatar, two countries that are essentially trying to bring peace in this region. So I think it's just a bit remarkable when you've got obviously Iran talking with these countries to try and get to some form of deal and some form of agreement, for then just hours later to see them attack them after the US strikes.
Inzi, there's a lot we could pick up on in that, but one thing you mentioned was the U.S. with some of its new military hardware maybe ramping up on this. We heard Donald Trump at the top of the show saying that the Strait of Hormuz is open, but even if the U.S. is now ramping up again its attacks on Iran, they can't really reopen the strait, can they? I mean, no ship is going to risk passage if Iran doesn't allow it.
No, you're right. And the Strait of Hormuz traffic has slowed down to a 5-week low. Look, after the Memorandum of Understanding was signed on the 18th of June, and we're almost a month now, Chris, from that being signed, the traffic did pick up and ships were going through, oil was flowing. Yes, not to the levels that we saw before the conflict, but it was quite high, and I think that was a positive sign. But clearly, this latest round of fighting, look, and what you've got to remember is Iran just needs to say the words that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And that's what they have said over the last few days. And that basically, that deters confidence within shipping companies. It means that vessels feel like they cannot pass through because of the dangers. And we've seen that if vessels don't go through the regulated and designated routes that Iran has put out, then they target them. They've targeted a Qatari vessel, a Saudi vessel, a Cyprus-flagged vessel over the last few days alone. And so clearly it's just too much of a risk for these vessels to pass through. And so now we're in a situation where Iran is saying, we've shut the Strait of Hormuz, ships are scared to pass through, but President Trump is saying, go through, it's absolutely fine. But it isn't. And I think this is where the worry lies, because ships could get targeted. And effectively, one more point I will say about the Strait of Hormuz, Chris, is that it's Iran's upper hand. They know that, and so do the United States. At any point that they're not happy with the negotiations, with the threats from President Trump, they will continue to have a chokehold over the world's economy by keeping that waterway shut.
Just quickly, Inzi, we have maybe another minute, but to follow up on that, yes, it is Iran's prerogative, and they've used this many times before, but we've also now seen, say, European leaders, the E3, demanding the reopening of the strait. Is there a risk here that Iran is overplaying its hand, maybe even bringing others into this conflict?
But look, I think that's a fair question, Chris. But the thing is, this war's been going on for almost 5 months now. And so I think, well, what Iran would say is that if the European countries were going to step in, then they would have stepped in by now. We know that President Trump has urged European countries previously, initially when Iran had shut the Strait of Hormuz, for them to send naval vessels to try and help reopen the waterway. And actually, many European countries said that they didn't want to help. Yes, in recent days, there's been plans for France and the UK to potentially send some naval forces to the region to try and open up the waterway. But that will take some time. And actually, once they do send forces here, what can they actually do from a defense capability, from a military capability to try and get ships moving? I think that is a huge question mark still. And also, Iran still has a huge military presence. Despite what President Trump has said, they've still got the capabilities to target vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. They've still got these fast boats that can navigate their way through the waterway. So I wouldn't write off Iran's military yet in terms of fighting back if there was this European coalition that came to the region, Chris.
Well, thanks very much for that update, Inzi. That was our Gulf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid. And now here's Anita Riota with today's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. A wildfire of exceptional scale has broken out in a forest near Paris. This as the country battles its third heat wave of the summer. 2 firefighting planes have been rushed to the region to tackle the blaze in the Fontainebleau forest, which sits around 60 kilometers southeast of the French capital. Japan says it recognizes the need to counter foreign intelligence better after a New York Times report that Russia has turned the country into a den of spies and key source of weapons components. Weak espionage laws have been blamed for Moscow's use of Japan as a key hub for intelligence gathering and procurement of dual-use technology needed for its war in Ukraine. And finally, a proposed bill requiring music distributors to screen song lyrics before release is sparking censorship concerns in South Korea. The amendment to the Music Industry Promotion Act was submitted last week and could force music distributors to pre-screen all tracks to determine whether they contain content harmful to minors before release. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Anita. Oliver Blume, the CEO of Europe's largest car maker, Volkswagen, is reportedly threatening to cut some 50,000 jobs in an effort to make the manufacturer more competitive. It's a sign of just how desperate the situation has become for a storied brand and also symptomatic of a much wider problem for German industry. Well, joining me now is Carsten Brzeski, Global Head of Macro at ING Research, joining us from Frankfurt. Good afternoon, Carsten.
Yeah, hi Chris, thanks for having me.
So can you outline, first of all, some of Volkswagen's challenges for us and whether they're unique, I guess, or part of a wider problem?
Well, indeed. Well, if you have some time, I'll try to explain them. Well, so Volkswagen, as the entire German automotive industry, has benefited tremendously in the last decade from sales in China. But over the last couple of years, Chinese auto producers have clearly caught up in China. Volkswagen and other German car manufacturers have clearly lost market shares in China, saw their sales going down there, which had a big impact, especially on Volkswagen, because a big chunk of Volkswagen's profits was made in China. Then, next to that, as we see that also Chinese car manufacturers are entering third markets and are also competing there with German, European car manufacturers. Another problem of Volkswagen is that it is a huge company. Don't forget that they have also had high cost positions. That has to do with the German economy. That we still have solid wages. We have too high energy prices. We have too high production costs. And while in the past, German manufacturers in general, but also Volkswagen in more detail, were always able to simply produce better goods, better cars that consumers were willing to pay for a higher price. They can no longer offset these higher production costs by higher sales prices, and this is why they're also under pressure.
Just explain that to us a little more, Carsten, how this has become such a big problem with consumers maybe not willing to spend what they were before. Because at the end of the day, Volkswagen is still Europe's largest car maker. That should count for something. But is this then about really keeping it that way? Do they see the writing on the wall that they're not going to remain in this position for long?
Well, to give Volkswagen some credit, because you very often also hear the story that Volkswagen actually missed the transition towards electric vehicles, and that is not entirely true. That might apply to other German car manufacturers, but I think that Volkswagen last year sold almost 1 million electric vehicles in Europe. So Volkswagen actually was always at the forefront of the electric vehicle development. So this is, I think, where Volkswagen had been falling behind. That it is really the people's car, Volkswagen, that they were no longer able to produce, because in the past a Volkswagen meant an affordable, good quality car for the people. But when you look at the price segmentation right now, it is also that Volkswagen rather serves the middle income to higher income households and no longer fulfills Germans, European, Westerns in general, this idea that everyone can get a good car for an affordable price. And this is where I think Volkswagen has been lacking. And the other point is and remains really Chinese competition, not only in the low price segment, but also increasingly in the more luxury car price segment.
Now I understand. I mean, Volkswagen has been debating what to do about this for quite a while. There was a big meeting of the supervisory board last week. No real agreement. There are some reports that unions are part of what are blocking the reform plans. Is that symptomatic of a broader problem in Germany, a kind of resistance to the change that's needed?
Well, that is definitely systematic. You know that the German economy has been in de facto stagnation for 7 years in a row, and we're currently still debating, which reforms are needed to get the German economy finally out of this stagnation wave. With the now ending World Cups, similar story. Germany has been hoping, I think, for the last 3 World Cups that this is a team that normally is always eligible to win the title, only to find themselves being kicked out in the early rounds of the tournament. But back to the economy and Volkswagen. I think what Volkswagen now is struggling with is this a pure cost issue? Because this is what all these plants currently increasingly look like. Lay off a couple of workers, close factories, reduce costs actually for research and innovation. At least these are the rumors that we hear through the media. But it clearly only aims at, again, cutting costs. I think and this is of course a reflex that the entire German industry was always known for. Try to become more efficient, and then they're going to sell their stuff anyhow. We're now in a situation, Volkswagen, as many parts of German industry in general, in which there is a big competitor, and that is China, that is also able to produce products at a comparable quality. So they are no longer competing only on the price and the costs, but also on the quality. And we haven't had a discussion yet, neither in Volkswagen nor in the German economy, whether the business model might need a change, whether the German industry might need to shift focus on other sectors in which it can be more competitive than it currently is.
Just finally, Carsten, is this about then the companies themselves that need to repair this, or is this the job of government? To continue with your World Cup analogy, if I may, is it the players, or do we need to sub out the manager?
Well, if it was so easy to just bring in Jürgen Klopp and everything would be solved, I guess Volkswagen would also sign for it. In all honesty, in this case, it's the combination. The exposure to China, to the Chinese market, was also a corporate decision. There was nothing any German government laid upon in individual companies. So I think, therefore, it is now also for the companies to really find the right way out of the current situation. What the government can do and what the government has to do, and probably even better than they're currently doing, is to create a framework that allows investments to stay in Germany, so to make the German economy attractive enough via a functioning infrastructure, via more digitalization, or via highly educated people, so that investing and producing in Germany remains attractive. That is task for the government, but to find a solution to get out of the individual problems, like in the case of Volkswagen, is clearly up to the CEOs and the companies themselves.
Carsten Brzeski, Global Head of Macro at ING Research in Frankfurt. Thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing. The time here in London is 12:18. Now, this weekend saw the Scandinavian country of Norway's hopes in the World Cup dashed by England in the quarterfinals. And while the dream is over, the country is being lauded not only for its performance, but even for being, good losers, as it were. Erling Haaland proudly declared their performance put Norway on the map. And anyone watching the World Cup over the last month may have heard this.
Man!
The Norwegian Viking chant there, harkening back to the days of Iceland as well, for anyone who can remember that. And we can speak now to our Oslo correspondent, Lars Bevanger, who's been following Norway's achievements during the tournament. Lars, how much did this weekend sting?
It stung a little bit, but not as much as it was sweet that we actually made it this far. I mean, it is amazing. Norway's not been in the World Cup final since 1998, so it was a long time coming. And I think everyone in Norway are just super happy with the effort of this team. And they're just preparing now actually to welcome them back. They're literally in the air on the way back to Oslo for a giant celebration again this evening.
Well, and then tell us, I mean, what kind of expectations there will be for that? You're putting very much a positive spin on it, perhaps hiding a little bit of pain, but is it also something about Norway being good losers here?
Yeah, I think so. Also, this team has really brought the country together, young and old, recent immigrants, people who've lived there all their lives. It's just been such a positive story all through this tournament. Of course, we would have wished to see them go on and be there for another week at least. But football is football, and what happened. But we're now already looking forward to what this team is going to do next. There's the Euros in a couple of years' time, and the team is still strong. But I think the after effect is going to be that more people are actually watching football in Norway now, and also that people are feeling a real sense of pride in this team.
Well, and tell us more broadly about that latter point there. Pride in this team, but has this also created perhaps a little bit of extra national pride that might not have been there before?
Yeah, I think so. And someone put it very succinctly. This is the first time in very long time that the country has come together over something that is not tragic and purely positive. And that is very true. So Norway's had, as you will probably all remember, the horrific terror attacks in 2011 on the 22nd of July, and also later a terror attack against a gay bar in Oslo not many years ago. These events obviously brought the country together in sorrow and anger, but this is now purely positive. Also, people have been highlighting the fact that Erling Haaland is a fantastic role model for both boys and girls. He's gracious in defeat as well. He's friendly. He's encouraging the rest of the team, even though he could be a massive prima donna if he wanted to. Obviously, he's the world's possibly most famous footballer right now. But he's really pulled together with the rest of the team, and has also been a very sort of gracious person in interviews. And I think a lot of people in Norway looked up to him as a really good role model. The opposite of Andrew Tate, if you like, for young men in particular.
Well, that's one way to put it. I mean, Lars, we've also seen companies get in on the act. I was curious to get your take on that. The airline Norwegian, for example, lost a bet to British Airways and so is now carrying their logo, but therefore also trying to entice the English over to Norway. Is that a bit of clever marketing? Are we seeing that across Norway as well, kind of using this to create some positive momentum about Norway?
Yeah, I mean, that was just a brilliant campaign. I mean, that's what you call earned media. They haven't spent any money. They just put out this wager with British Airways that whoever loses will carry the other company's logo. And obviously, Norwegian lost and have been carrying the BA logo. It created a huge stir. Loads of other airlines commented in the comment fields on Instagram. So they brought a lot of attention to this. So for Norwegian Air, this is a massive win. I haven't seen anyone else do something that clever. Obviously, the World Cup has been used in all kinds of advertisements, from barbecue meat to supermarkets in Norway, but nothing as smart as that one.
Just to follow up on that there, Lars, I mean, is there any expectation that this has, as Erling Haaland put Norway on the map? Might there be any expectation that people will come to Norway, have maybe a little more of a sense of Norway as a result of this?
Oh, I think so. Norway's already a very popular tourist destination, and the tourism industry is growing rapidly. We get to see especially a lot of tourists from Asia and China. But I think now also a lot more Americans might be aware of that Norway is more than fjords and Vikings, although that's the image that has been portrayed during the World Cup as well. But I do think that people have been looking at particularly the fans' reaction and the rowing and this utter joy that they've spread not only in Norway but around the US as well, where the traveling fans have been doing all these stunts. So I think it must have piqued a lot of people's interest in what kind of country is it these people come from.
Well, and good luck to Norway as the team returns to the country later this week. Lars Bevenger, Monocle's Oslo correspondent, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. And finally, on today's show, for Monocle Magazine's July-August issue, Monocle Radio's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, spoke with the Belgian superstar Angèle. Here is a highlight of that conversation, with Angèle describing the experience of performing at the 2024 Paris Olympics closing ceremony.
I mean, I could maybe say a life-changing experience in a way, because, and first of all, nothing of that was completely planned. It was last minute. I was on vacation in Italy, eating pasta, doing nothing else but just chilling. And then I got a call, and it was about Phoenix wanted me to sing Night Call. And it was, to be honest, I first was like, no, I freaked out. And it has been, like, at that time, I think I haven't been on stage for like a year. I think something like that. And so I was like, oof, no, I'm not ready. It's been too long. Forget about me. I'm like rusty, you know. I don't know how to perform anymore. And they insisted. And then I asked for some time to reflect on it, because I was like, I don't want to take a decision that I'm going to regret. And this seems like a big thing. But I didn't have a lot of connection. And then my managers, who I still need to thank for every day, they made a list of the pros and the anti. Like, they were like, okay, the good thing about it is it's going to be a great moment. It might just be big. It might just change your career. And I was like, no, it's never going to change my career. What are you talking about? And then the like cons were like, it is a stressful thing. And you famously, like internally in our team, you famously don't love performing live for streaming or TV. This is like kind of my nightmare. But they were like, but it's also, maybe it was like a way for you to take back everything you left by not being confident on stage. And so I thought of it, and I was like, okay, I think this is one song. I love this song. I had one of my first breakup / new rebound love story when I was 17 during a summer. I love Phoenix, obviously. So I was like, there's so many reasons to say yes. And another thing is, I got there, so I had to like go in Paris for a week to do rehearsal, fittings. Just for the fitting, I wanted something simple, and we thought with my stylist of like a kind of like a catsuit. Is that how do you call it? And the idea was just to have something simple but strong. And I had just cut my hair off a year before, and it took me 6 months to love it, because the first version of my hair was not good, not for me. And then all of a sudden my hair looked great, and that outfit was fun. And then they wanted me to walk from a point to another, and so I guess I need to like rhythm it a little bit so I don't fall with my high heels. And just to finish, because that's fun, is like everyone is like, the walk, like how did you come up with that idea? And you feel so confident and you know exactly what you're doing. Yes. And I've never been more stressed out in my life, because the second before the music started, people have been telling us, don't walk on these screens on the floor, because they're like, you will fall. You won't make it if you like walk on those. And we're like, sure. And I don't know what happened, but all of the athletes that were surrounding the stage decided to jump on the scene. And so it was like...
And nobody knew what was going on.
Nobody knew. And it was just crazy, because I remember I was about to sing, and the person in charge of like the organization were like, well, I guess you might just have to stay where you are, but just the Steadicam can join you, because they're like, he's surrounded by people on stage, and we're like trying to push people. And so I was like, okay. And so I got on stage and I started singing, and I didn't know where the camera was. And so I was like, I have to find the camera so I can look in it instead of just being in the emptiness. And then I found him, and I was like, okay, here's the camera, here's another one. And then I had this whole like catwalk for myself, because they like pushed the people, and they were like, you gotta get off the stage. And so the walk was just also a way to like slow down and to not get too quickly on the stage where people were just there. And what I mean is, it's fun how if I would have wanted to make something that would really make people like see me, I would have done something more complicated than just walk and being chill. And so that was also another learning experience, because I was like, sometimes simplicity is the secret.
One of the best walks I've seen, I have to say.
Thank you.
I'm curious about your relationship with electronic music, because Nightcall, very electro, synthy, and your more recent collaboration with Justice as well, which is taking you to that direction. Tell us a bit more about that.
It's fun how I've listened to French touch music my whole life, and I think growing up in Belgium with an older brother and with my mom has specific music taste. And so, yes, electronic music has always been part of my life when I grew up. But something I really loved about French touch was the importance of melody, the importance of chords, nostalgic chords. And so it was just bringing, even you can see some very classic kind of like chanson française chords in some songs of Daft Punk, or even Justice. Some like chord progression are incredibly musical, and that's what I love. I love the roundness of some synthesizer and the sharpness of some bass or beats, and I grew up listening to that unconsciously, and there's so many albums that really created my musical ear, and specifically my electronic musical ear. What's so interesting is that when Phoenix asked me to do this Nightcall cover, I was already doing a lot of research.
It was your vibe already.
Yes, completely. And maybe this is also why it worked out so well, and it was so probably natural, is because I was really feeling that this was like a moment where I could connect to something that I was doing, and it's a song that I literally grew up with. Now I'd love to still have fun with synthesizers, and I met incredible artists, and I wish I could say more, but I definitely can say that I've been collaborating with incredible artists.
The Belgian singer Angèle there, speaking with Fernando Augusto Pacheco. You can listen to the full interview on the Monocle Weekly. You can also read more about Angèle in the July-August issue of Monocle magazine, out now. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Thomas Waterhouse. Our studio manager was Mariella Bevan. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Termack. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.